Welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. My name is Yurii. I help people and brands shine through communities and personal connections. And my guest is Karisa Desjardins, an experienced community leader who operates right at the intersection of community, customer experience, and business impact, from supporting customers at Hopper to managing larger scale ambassadors activation at theSkimm, and now leading the L&D Collective, a community connecting learning and development leaders at 360 Learning. So welcome, Karisa.
Thank you, Yuri. Thanks for having me.
Super happy to talk to you. It's always, this community world orbits like flying around there. And then I was like, oh, it's like led by community webinar. Oh, Carissa, we must talk. Like, let's do it. And here we are. So thank you so much for coming. And let's start with a super easy question. What is one community activity that you enjoy the most and why?
It's a good question. I mean, maybe this is a basic answer, but for me, it's the in-person events that we do. Any kind of in-person event I've ever done for a community is always where you kind of see all of the work that you've done come together. You see all of the connections happening in real time, and you're just like, this is like the culmination of everything that we've been working towards. We just had a panel in London last week, and I think this was like one of those moments where I was just like, wow, this was worth all of the effort that we put in. This was worth all of the time connecting members, finding members to be panelists, and all of the stuff that goes into the logistics of it all. And up until the moment where the event happens, you're like, are people going to show up? Are they going to enjoy it? Like all of this, and then it happens, and you're like, oh man, that went so well, and people are happy to be there, and people feel good when they leave, and it's just a great feeling to kind of have those things happen and to see the connection in real time, see the impact it has on people, and you're kind of just like, oh man, that feels good, and it's cool to see, and you see like the sort of like the aftermath after the conversations happen and people come up to you and they're like, this was great, thanks so much, and you're like, thanks for coming. So for me, it's really the in-person events is my favorite thing. Like virtual events are great too, but that in-person connection is something that you just can't beat it.
Sometimes when I speak to community experts, they're hosting events, and when they have to go to like leadership and they're asking like, okay, what's the ROI of this event? Like, what do we get from this? So I'm curious, like from your experience, how are in-person events connected with a like bigger business goal?
Yeah, that's something that's super important. And I think because obviously in-person events take a lot more time to plan, there's a lot more budget that needs to be involved. So you do really have to show why this is worth you putting together and taking the time to do. Um, and I think for us, uh, it's a really great place for us to hear what is actually happening on the ground. So the L&D Collective that I run is a community of learning and development leaders. And so it's really crucial for our teams at 360 Learning to hear what are actually the challenges that people are facing, and hear what solutions people have, the advice. And I think it helps us as a company, keep our ear to the ground. So I think for us, like when I'm able to bring back insights from the community, like really just like, the day after I'm able to go to leadership and say, they talked about this, and this, these are their challenges. That gives them something tangible to be like, yes, please keep doing these because it's good for us to know these things. Otherwise, where else are they gonna, necessarily find it?
What do they do with these challenges? What do they do with the signals that they get from you? Why I'm asking, because sometimes you can come to the community, get all these insights, share it with the leadership, with other teams, and then nothing. So what happens next after you share this information?
Yeah, it depends on the team, but I would say like one great example is we have a content team, and so for them, it's really great to hear these are the challenges. We can write a blog about what you could do or how our product could be helpful with that. I think one really great example is we have something called the L&D Performance Academy, and it's a free resource that our team created based on the challenges of L&D pros. And basically, it's a series of these series of courses that you can take that are all sort of like the kind of skills that you need to keep up to date in L&D. And a lot of that comes from what we hear in the community. I think we even had asked our community, what AI tools are you using? How are you using them? And we were able to incorporate that into the academy. So it also feeds back into the resources that we're able to give back to the community. And I think that's one of the biggest things, at least right now for us. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways, but that's the one that comes to mind.
And it also sounds like it's much more valuable for people because it's not like you are feeding them with something that you kind of think is right, but you are kind of like asking them, they're sharing, and then you
Yeah.
are like coming back like, hey, here's what people are using. Go try this, and like maybe
Yeah.
this can be like a tool of choice or whatever. But it's like it's not just you being like a talking head. It's like the voices of all the community, and I feel like it's super valuable. And also to your point about the event, so. I totally believe that when you're hosting a webinar or like let's say some online meetup, it's super easy. You just like click Zoom. Okay, you maybe just do some registrations before, but overall, like it's almost nothing preparation, and then you going back and yeah, it was good because you see like people coming and blah 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 recordings. Yeah, but in-person event, it's totally different story. There is a lot of background work, and I'm curious, like, what are the key steps? What are the key things that you keep in mind when you are preparing a successful in-person event?
I think for me, it's figuring out what purpose does this event serve. We do all different kinds of in-person events. I think we lean more towards these like networking lunches, but I'm really trying to move us away from that into having a reason for coming, which is why last week we did this panel in London. We've done a panel in Paris, and it's a totally community-led panel. So when I'm thinking about in-person events, like moving forward, for me, it's like, why are they coming? What are they getting out of this, aside from meeting other people who work in their industry, and figuring out what is the point to draw them in that's going to make it worth it for them, and they're going to leave with something tangible they can take away. And I think we're definitely leaning more towards that with our in-person events. So it's really like what's the value for them. Just because I do an event and I check it off of my like to-do list for the quarter doesn't mean that I actually had an impact. So it's really about what is it in it for them.
And you mentioned community-led event. What does it mean?
So for me, this means engaging, like finding a way to bring the community into the event itself. And whether that means that they're helping to host the event, or they have like a topic discussion that they're going to open the event with. We've done this before where we've invited a member to kind of kick off the event with sharing a story, a success story, or like a failure and what they learned from it, so that we're able to kind of kick off these conversations in a way that feels, like we're all learning from each other. And I think that the panels that we've started doing have also been a really great way to say, like, what do I have to say to you guys about learning and development? Not much, but I know that you guys have a lot to say to each other. And so bringing them into the fold and saying, I want you to share that with each other, and bringing them into it is kind of the way that I've been doing it.
I really liked one of the uh, you wrote in one of the posts that instead of trying to be the voice in the room, I focused on something else, listening and building the simple systems around the people already showing up and excited to build together. And I feel like you are not trying, once again, to be like the loud and like the speaking head, like the expert in the room, but still you have to kind of like make this connection happen. And I'm curious, like, what is what is what is the secret? Like, what is the secret sauce of making this connection and making people having these conversations?
Mm. I mean, for me, I think it's been relationship building. This didn't, I've been at 360 for about 2 years now, and this was not something I was able to do. I wasn't able to have a community-led community the day that I joined. It took about 6 months of listening to the community, having coffee chats with members every week. I think I had like 3, 4, 5 coffee chats with different people asking why they're here, what keeps them here, what do they want to see more of. And so for me, I think it took probably like 9 months to really get to a place where I was like, okay, community led is the way to go. Now I need to start talking to people who I've already spoken to and say, hey, are you interested in actually, you said you were interested in a book club. Do you want to actually do that? Do you want to work on that with me? And I'll do all the hard stuff and you just run the book club. And so it took time and relationship building, and especially for these in-person events, doing these community-led panels, it really took time seeing the members at events every other month. When we have breakfasts in Paris, usually once or twice a quarter, London lunches once a quarter, meeting people, talking to them, understanding their expertise so that I could then go back and be like, hey, I remember you said you're really interested in talking about AI. Do you want to come do a virtual discussion on that for the community? And so it's really just it's tedious, right? Like this is not something that maybe can scale, but I think it's really important to build those relationships from the beginning so that you really understand what your members want, what their expertise is, and then you can kind of tap them when the moment comes. And obviously for a lot of people, it's also a great opportunity for them to showcase their expertise to everybody. So it also has to be a win-win.
It's always a very thin line between of like using people for an unpaid work and like inviting them and bringing some extra value and highlighting them. And we will go to this in a second. But before that, guide me a little bit through this 9 months process that you shared with me. So when you joined the community, because I totally understand that it takes a lot of time and sometimes it might feel as it's never enough. You might keep on doing and doing and doing and doing conversations. And if you really want to, you will always hear something new. You will always hear some extra, side quests to take upon this. But then you have to analyze and find what to focus on because you have to move somewhere. So how this process looked like for you from the moment you joined until the moment that you understood, okay, this is what I have to do.
Yeah, what does it look like? I mean, I had a whole Excel sheet where I would take notes from every member that I met with. I'd ask them specific questions, I would take down the notes, and then I would kind of try to make sense of that. And I think we had started using AI around this time, so I was using that to also help me kind of get some analysis from those conversations. And I think like where it started from, like how it went from there was basically like, for example, we had this member who wanted to do a book club. We
Hmm.
had spoken a little bit, and I was kind of like, I really don't know how to start. I'm not sure where to start with this. And what actually helped is now that after I had spoken to all these people in the community and I had gotten some ideas and some knowledge on what they were looking for and which ones were interested in actually being a part of building things, I actually went back to my community of community managers and was like, hey, I have a member who really wants to run a book club. Have you ever done one? If so, how did it go? Any advice, any pitfalls, things to avoid. And that's actually the thing that helped me launch this book club into what's been like our most successful piece of programming we've ever done in the community. So I think once I had all of this knowledge, I was like, okay, I'm one person. I need to maybe go back to the people that have been there, done that in my industry and kind of just get their own insights. And that is also what helped me build like a really good program. I presented it back to who is now the member who is our host of the book club. And he was like, totally love it. I'm on board. Let's do it. And then we launched a book club. So I think it's listening to the community and taking those notes and meeting with them. And then it's also like going back to your own people, kind of being like, okay, this is what I think about it. Have you done this? Have you been there? What does that look like? And then taking that and kind of building it. So it's also asking other people how they've done it.
And you talked about the book club, but I believe that it was just one of the many ideas that community members share with you. So how did you identify that? Okay, let's go with the book club.
Mm. I think I identified it because it was something that they had tried to launch it before I had joined. There was like a sort of a pilot they had tried, and there was a lot of interest initially, and then it kind of flopped. And I did ask the member, I'm like, why do you think it flopped? What do you think we could do better? Um, and so I think he actually was like, I think he's like, I know what I did wrong. I picked the book. I didn't let the members pick the book. I told them what we were going to read. I didn't involve them in the process and all these things. And so I was like, okay, it sounds like you know what we could do better. So I'm willing to try this again. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. And when it comes to other events that people had messaged me about, not all of them are always going to work, right? I'm always willing to try. I'm always willing to kind of like put it out there. If there's enough interest in the community, that in this topic or this theme, I'm more than willing to test it out. And I think in the beginning, I was much more open to testing pretty much anything because it kind of was like, let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Now I am a bit more refined about really. I think I now have a better like innate understanding of what the community values and what makes sense and what doesn't. So there are moments where I'm like, I'm not really sure this is the moment, but like come back to me in 6 months and let's see if it's different. Um, but yeah, I'm much more I'm much more focused about what really makes sense now because I also have limited bandwidth, and so we also have to play around with that too to be like, how can we make sure I am also able to take this on and help you with it properly?
It's sometimes also hard to identify if a person really wants to do something or they just say they want to do something. I believe that you had a lot of experience with like these people, and now since you have like been doing it for over 2 years already, so and yes, you've said that you already refine your approach. How do you understand if the person really wants to do something?
I mean, I don't know if you ever know that, right? Because people can say things and sometimes follow through isn't there. For me, I've created sort of like a little bit of a process for myself where I tell folks that want to run events, I'm like, okay, well, we have space in, next month's calendar. If you can get me the date and the time and the content of what you're going to, or even at least the idea of what you're going to share or what you're planning on the discussion being by this date, that's kind of my cutoff. If I don't hear from them before the next newsletter goes out, it doesn't happen. So I really, that's kind of my buffer of like, I give them the guidelines of like, I need this by this date. And if not, then like, I can kind of see that the follow through isn't there. And that's sort of my current like way of managing that. But sometimes you do, if we did a series, we've done a couple of different series of events where it just like wasn't as successful as you thought it would be. It didn't totally flop, but it was like, okay, we've done a couple. They're not really going as we thought. Like it's probably just not the right moment, or maybe we don't have the right thing. Let's pause and come back to it when we both feel like it's a better idea, or we've built it out maybe in a way that makes more sense. And so, that's also something that happens. And, I always tell the member, I'm like, don't feel bad. You tried it. It was cool that you tried it. It's better to try than not try at all. And just kind of making sure that also the community member doesn't feel like they've like put in time for something that they didn't happen the way that they wanted it to as well.
And I can also believe that some people are more natural hosts of the
Mm,
events because, someone is doing this like for, I don't know, their children, or someone is like a part of another community where they're running events. So they have this experience. And some people might be very interested in running the events, but they have no experience at all. So I'm curious, how do you guide your, let's call them ambassadors? How do you guide your ambassadors to run those events?
Yeah, it's a good question. And you're right. I think there are some people that are naturally, it's just not something that they've done before. And I think it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to be like, to get to put yourself out there a little bit. So I'm always really impressed when people who are, I assume, are a bit more shy come forward and want to do these things. And I always tell them, I'm like, you're with people that, are in your industry. Also, I think learning and development professionals are some of the kindest people you'll ever meet. And they're also like, they're never going to say a mean thing to you, like they're going to just be like, it's just another human and we're all kind of in this together. So like, I try to remind people that even before the panel last week, a couple of the panelists I think had not done like a public speaking thing before, and for them, I said to them in our practice run, I was like, listen, you're in a room of people who get what you're doing. They're doing the same thing every day. Like if you slip up or you have a blank spot when you're asked a question, like totally normal. Don't worry about it. Like it's live. This is what happens when things happen live. Not everything's going to be perfect. But yeah, I think when, especially, with the virtual events, I tell folks, I'm like, it's totally fine. It's nobody's going to remember it. And at the same time, I'm like, just be yourself. You already had the idea, and if it's a good enough idea that I'm letting you do it. So be confident in yourself. And like I said, if it's not perfect, that's also okay. This is not like a super professional, high stakes environment. This is a community where we're all kind of just learning from each other. It's meant to be chill. It's meant to be like talking amongst your peers. Like I really try to remind people that it's not a high stakes environment and it's okay. Like it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I can totally relate because I remember when I was running communities for professionals, I had to kind of like choose speakers for each event. But it's like after like 3 or 4 events, people were coming up with their ideas. They were sharing their thoughts, and they're, oh, I've never delivered any presentations, but I saw that there is such a great community and people are always happy to listen, etc. And I come up with this presentation, and then they're delivering. And what I also noticed that it was kind of like growing the stars because you are an expert, and if you don't have public speaking experience, it doesn't mean that you cannot be like public speaker.
Yeah.
You have to try sometimes. And exactly to
Yeah.
your point, community event, it's not a Shark Tank. You are not defending yourself like in between like some jury or whatever. You're
Hmm.
like speaking to like-minded people who are just like you, who are here to support you, to learn from you, also to share their experience. And it's like I feel like it's a totally different switch when you have this in your mind.
Totally.
And coming back to ambassadors, so it's something that I kind of like a little bit struggle with myself in a way that sometimes it's always hard to find, am I giving too much tasks to a person? Am I using them? am I helping them? So it's always, I have this angel and devil sitting on my different shoulders, thinking about this or that ambassador program, like how to make it happen. So how ambassador program work for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So as of right now, I'm in the process of formalizing an ambassador program for the L&D Collective. And the way that I'm looking at it is I'm basing it off of the sort of naturally member-led events and programming that's happened in the community and kind of looking at how do I take what has sort of been happening naturally in a very ad hoc way into formalizing it into a process. And that's one of the first things I thought about was like, how do I make sure that this feels like it is beneficial for them as much as it's beneficial for us? Because my philosophy on community is that the value of a community is it has to be member value plus business value. Otherwise, like I just don't see how the equation works. Both sides need to be able to get something from it. And so yeah, what I've actually been working on is breaking down like I'm in the process of brainstorming what would different roles look like in the community. There are people who love to host events. That's not everybody. That's really not everybody. So I'm like, what other ways do I see people activating in the community in a natural way that I could formalize and say, hey, maybe you could be, I've thought, for example, a community board. Maybe you're not like super loud in the community, but you have a lot of ideas and thoughts and you want to share that feedback with us and help us build the community from sort of more behind the scenes. Or are you somebody that really has a lot of experience and you want to share that and like answer people's questions? Maybe you're somebody who is like a Slack ambassador and you answer when somebody asks a question about, oh, I'm trying to build this training for XYZ and I'm trying to use AI. Has anyone done that? How do I do it? And you're like, I know. And you answer that. So for me, I've been trying to figure out how do I break this down into bite-sized roles that people can participate, but it doesn't feel like this huge undertaking.
So how do you make it work? I feel like it's also always the hardest question. Like,
Yeah.
but and the hardest question is also because not just only what you are feeling, but also because of like you are dealing with humans and people are different people, and you never know. You might think that it might be a huge part, but for someone it's like a tiny part, or vice versa. You might think that it's whatever, it's just 5 minutes, but for someone it will be 2 hours. Like how to identify that you are doing it in the right way.
Mm. So one thing that we're going to be doing as part of the ambassador program is, well, we already sort of have the ambassadors, right? So we know the people that are already quite active. And the idea is when we have our sort of like, this is our plan for building what this could look like, is to bring those ambassadors in and be like, what do you think? What do you think? As somebody who's already activated for us, does this seem doable? Are we out of our minds? Like, and to just kind of gut check with them. And I think the other thing that I've also thought about is um, making it sort of like a time-bound commitment. And it's not like, okay, you're an ambassador forever now and you have to run events for the rest of your life. It's like, okay, you're signing on to be an ambassador for whatever the next 6 months or whatever that looks like. And so people feel like, okay, I'm not tied to this forever, but I'm making the conscious choice to do this because I want to. And I know that in 6 months or a year or whatever, I can either do it again or I can say, oh, you know what? I did it. It was awesome. I'm going to take a break for now. So I think gut check with the community and also making it something that is also time bound so people can imagine like, okay, it doesn't have to be forever.
Yeah, I remember it was in the CMX when they made CMX ambassadors. It was like 3 or 6 months programs that you could apply, then you was chosen, and then you could like, continue apply again if you want to continue like the next month or the next quarter or how they did it. Or you can just, okay, I have another plans. And it's also helpful because I also understand that people are not invested in the community all the time the same
Yeah.
because when they join the communities they might be hyped, they want to meet people, maybe grow their businesses, or maybe like I don't know, make some connections, etc. Maybe they're struggling with finding a job and they want to do this, but then if everything goes right, they like create a business, they find a job, they make friends, and they have less and less time to actually participate in the community, which is also good because
Yeah.
like we
It served
always
its
have.
purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and also it's given an opportunity for new people to try this because
Yeah.
if you like created a role and there is one person is like an ambassador for like 20 years, yeah, it's kind of nice, but still like people, how can I become ambassador? Why only this person is getting all the highlights and all the
Yeah.
attention? So it's always about that. And when you are finding these ambassadors, how do you understand? Okay, let's take a little one step back. in your position currently, you already have this historical data of who is active, of whom to talk to, and then you're coming to them, hey, does it look doable? But if you were creating this from scratch or coming back when you just started, creating the ambassador program and finding these ambassadors, how did you understand this person might be an ambassador? I should trust this person. Like how do you find these people?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think I've already mentioned it a little bit, but it's really the people that I met at events, the
Hmm.
people that came to the events that I actually had a real conversation with, the people that, one thing that I did do during the first year was I did a community health survey, which I don't think it's ever been done before here. And I was like, well, we kind of need to just ask everybody, right? And so that community health survey was also super insightful for me to go, oh, this person is like clearly has a lot, one is like really happy with the community, likes it, but also has a lot of ideas for what could be improved. And it clearly, and like when I actually did, so I think, yeah, we did the survey itself, and then I actually followed up with one-on-one interviews with the people that were open to it. And that helped a ton in terms of really one connecting, starting to build that relationship, and also being like, okay, I get the sense that you might be interested. And I even said at the end of the call, like, would you be interested in participating in the community in some way, whether it's events or another type of programming? And when the people who said yes, I marked them in green and I said, I'm going to come back to you when the time comes. And so I think the community, doing like a community survey is also a great way to also identify them, especially when you're new and even though I had a list of people, like that doesn't necessarily mean, because like you said, there's this community cycle and some people come and then they do their thing and then they leave and then they come back. So sometimes I reached out and people might not be in the community anymore, or they changed industries. So the community health survey was a really great way for me to additionally identify other people.
By the way, about the survey, what are the questions that you include there? Why I'm asking, because sometimes
Mm.
I know that some community members want to ask everything. I mean, community builders want to ask everything, and they create a survey like for 20 questions, like takes 20 minutes to answer, and they're like, no, I will not answer this. So what do you usually include in those?
Yeah, yeah. I've definitely at first had a very long survey, and everyone helped me bring it down to like a manageable number of questions. I think if I'm remembering, it's been like a year and a half since we did it, but I think I remember asking like, what is it that you enjoy about this community? What brings you joy? What brings you back? What gets you to log on to Slack, once a week or whatever? What gets you here? Um, what could be improved? What is not working that could be better? Um, I'm trying to think of what else we asked them. We asked them what their role was to understand whether they're more junior or more senior, because that really also depends on like the type of programming that we run. It also kind of depends on like where people are in that area as well, because junior L&Ds are looking for very different things than senior L&Ds, right? So it's also like how can we understand who the makeup of the community a little bit. Um, and then we also asked people, if they had taken part in a certain piece of programming before. We have a mentorship program, like how that was helpful for them. Is the community helping them achieve their goals? What are their goals? And then I think we also asked about general like brand sentiment, about how they feel about the L&D Collective and 360 Learning, and if they understand that connection as well, because that was something we also wanted to make clear. So yeah, I asked as many questions as I was able to ask without making it too long. But it was really trying to understand the general sentiment, and really, really get some critical feedback on what could be better, and the ideas that they had for making it better.
And where do you distribute the survey to get the most answers?
We did, let's see. We have a monthly newsletter, so that was kind of the big way to promote it, in the Slack channels. Um, and then also just those annoying dedicated emails that are like, hey, we have a survey and it's going to help you if you tell us what you think. So a couple of dedicated emails to kind of remind folks about it. And then asking people to like, oh, if you talk to another member, mention it to them, at the events. I think I said like at every virtual event, I was like, please take our survey. So, I definitely talked about it a lot anywhere I could. But we are a closed community, so there aren't that many ways to really promote it. But we did our best to use the channels we had.
Why I'm asking, because sometimes people are afraid to doing many touch points and they think that, okay, I sent one email and that's enough. But actually, even your like very engaged community members, they might have missed that email, or it went to spam, or at some point they had something other on their mind and they just missed it. So, sometimes you have to remind like 5 times, and maybe somewhere around like fourth or fifth, they will actually take some action. So it's
Yeah.
always good, to use different channels. And you told a little bit about already about connecting community with business, but to make this happen, you have to work with other teams. So I'm curious, in your experience, what are 3 teams that you usually work with the most when you are doing the community work?
Yeah. I would say, I mean, I definitely work with our content team. I'm also technically part of the content team, so I guess it is my team. But before I wasn't on the content team, and so I worked with the content team a lot. When there was these crossovers for like the L&D Performance Academy and getting the community's input on AI tools and kind of like trying to find the connections where the community can feed into other things that we're building, or we can tap the community for their thoughts and advice on things. Sometimes, when we launched the Performance Academy, we also kind of launched it to the L&D Collective first. Like we're like, hey, PS, this is happening. Like you guys should check it out before it's like, goes live. So finding those moments where we can kind of work together with content. Events is obviously another team that I do work with. I do attend a couple of our different trade shows across the year, and my goal is to be there to be like, hey, L&D Collective members, like come say hi. We have your notebooks and pens and stickers, and so that's also a great way to also like expand the community's presence and to get in front of the people that would be interested in this type of community. And of course, I go to the events team for advice on when we're doing these types of events. When we did our first community-led panel in Paris last fall. The first thing I did before I even started planning the panel was I went to the events team and I said, "How do I do this?" I was like, "I've never done something like this before. How do you get the speakers? How do you prep speakers? Like, how do I make sure we have the right location, the food, all of these things?" A lot of the events I do are they're pretty DIY. Like I can kind of figure it out myself, but a panel was like a big undertaking. So I really go to the events team for advice on some of these things because events isn't my full job, but it's a portion. I'm not necessarily an events expert. So for me, it's great to go to those people on my team to get their advice and expertise. Um, and I think the last one is design. I love working with our design team. They are part of what makes our community beautiful. We have really beautiful branding, and they have a really innate understanding of like the community, its value, and how to translate that into the visual identity. We actually did a sort of like small refresh of the community branding earlier this year, and it really brought it from something that felt like very like 2015 to like 2025. And so, yeah, I'm always working with them to just make sure that what we do create visually makes sense for our community and also feels like the right vibe.
You
So
know,
yeah.
you already shared that for content team, they get a lot of community signals of what to write about, what to talk about, what create content about. But I'm
Mm.
curious, what's in it for event and design teams? What do they take from community?
Mm, that's a good question. Um, I mean, for the events team, I think it's always nice when they get hear feedback from the L&D Collective on our events. A lot of our members will attend the events, and it's obviously not just for the L&D Collective. They're also coming for the other aspects that are happening when we have L&D Next that happens twice a year, once in London and once in Paris. And so I think for them, I think the L&D Collective is like they're already bought in, right? These people, like, they love the community, and they're also probably like maybe even fans of 360 learning as well. So for them, it's kind of like they're already bought in. If they're happy at an event, like our events team is never mad to hear like, okay, like the L&D Collective like the event, like that's great. Um, and I think, yeah, the design team, I mean, I think that we recently started doing these member spotlights to sort of celebrate. We hit 5,000 members, and it's kind of like, let's take a moment to celebrate that. And I do think our design team, they always like our posts. So I think that they're happy to see them being used and to see people seeing them. So I think for them, it's just something that they get to create this extra thing that it's not 360 learning exactly. It's a little bit on the sides. They get to be a little creative with the things that they create for us outside of like the way that 360 learning brands itself. So I don't know. I don't know how they feel about it, but I'd like to think that they enjoy creating it for us.
We might go and ask, hey, by the way, how do you feel about this? So, and and what other teams that you are bringing community signals to? What like from this kind of like what other teams that are getting most value out of the community?
Yeah, definitely. I would say like one thing that we do on a weekly basis is I have a weekly insights newsletter that I write based on what the community has been discussing in the Slack or the different virtual meetups we've had, or even the in-person ones. And it goes to a variety of different stakeholders at the company. But I think it's always interesting for our sales teams and our CSPs, our customer success folks, to kind of understand like what people are talking about, and especially if they're mentioning 360, if there's any sort of like positive feedback or critical feedback, like it's really great for me to bring it back to them so that they can also hear directly from these folks, like what is actually helpful for us and like what's working in the product. When people recommend us to other people in the community, it's always like it makes them feel good, right? They're kind of like, okay, great, like people do like us and they're recommending us. It's not a bad thing to see that. So it's always a nice thing to be able to share that back with them. And then of course, like there are things that people share in the community about what they wish an LMS had or what they wish it could do. So I guess product as well. It's also great for them to get an idea of like, okay, this is also what other LMSs have that we don't. And so it's just again, on the ground feedback that they're getting. And so I think it can be really helpful for them in that sense.
It's a little bit easier to get leadership buy-in when you're already delivering, when you have ambassadors, when you have people sharing their feedback, where they are not afraid, when they understand that it's like a safe and trust space and they can openly share it and not being punished for that anyhow. But it takes time. And as I've said, it took you 9 months to actually talk to people and identify these ambassadors and stuff. So how to get leadership buy-in when community is a long-term journey?
Yeah. I think I'm lucky in the sense that when I came into this role, I understood from the get-go that the executives had already bought into the community. So I was like, great, good starting point. What I did learn is that you need to continuously communicate that. And at the beginning, I was still kind of figuring out the best way to do that. And I think now we've got it to a pretty good system where like I'm pretty much like at least once a week or once a month at minimum, like telling like a good thing that has happened in the community, whatever that ends up being. Um, and so I think it's about like you have to kind of be like loud and proud about it. And again, it depends on what is going to be important for your stakeholders. But like anytime that I see a client who has said a nice thing about 360 learning, I'm like, hey guys, by the way, this month this client said something really nice about us in the community. So like it's working, or at least in that sense, like it's we're hearing good and positive sentiment from folks. Um, but yeah, it's really just been about continuously communicating. And then I think also it can be, I think that it can be really easy to go on autopilot when like you've got all the programming, you know your role, you're like, okay, these are the things that I do, and you can kind of just like, focus and do it. Um, but then I think you can't go on autopilot. You also need to be like, what's something new I can try that I can then bring back to the stakeholders and tell me, look, we tried this thing and it was super successful. For example, we started doing these sort of like local chapter events. It's very small. And so, we weren't really sure if it was going to be successful. And lo and behold, our Copenhagen chapter had an event with over 10 people yesterday, which for us is a big deal for a small
Yeah.
local event. And it's cool to be like, hey, do you guys know we had 10 people at an event in Copenhagen yesterday? And so it's also about continuing to try new things. And when they work, make sure you tell people like, hey, we tried this new thing and it really worked. And I think that also is like the good for them to know because they're like, oh, you are still like doing new stuff. It's not like you're just doing the same old thing over and over again. Um, Anyways, I don't know if that really answers the question, but um, I really think advocating for yourself and like sharing the good things, whether because like sometimes you run an event and you're kind of like, oh, it was fine, you still need to tell people about it because for you, you're doing it every day, you're in it, and it can sometimes be like, oh yeah, we just did it and it's over and it's done. And it's like, actually, no, stakeholders are going to be happy to hear the insights from it, what they learned from it, if we were mentioned, if competitors were mentioned, like all of these things that can help them better understand their own jobs and what they can do to like make things better or, improve the product, etc.
And I also feel like the more you try new things, the more feedback and the better you understand where to move with the product itself. Because, like, as you've said, you can just stick to one thing, but also community members can get bored. because like world is changing. There are like some new technologies coming, new things are coming, and even in the learning development, there are so many changes, and there are so many people who are talking about like mindset or how to learn better, or all this ADHD stuff, or like the attention deficit, and there are so many things that you can still dive into, and I feel like it's continuous learning once again, and you can never stop there. And once again, coming back to the tool, so I'm curious,
Mhm.
in your day-to-day community work, what are the tools that are using?
Mm. So our community is run on Slack, a free Slack. So that's kind of where all of this conversation is happening. We also use a tool called Tighten sort of an add-on to Slack. And this has been something that has helped us, helped us automate a lot. It helps us get deeper insights on the community. We also have like a Salesforce integration that's a part of that. So that is a tool that's been really helpful in taking away some of the manual labor from me and being able to automate and kind of I call it like my part-time intern, basically. And so that's a tool that we've been using since the beginning of this year. And then outside of that, I mean, we're using AI at our company. We use Gemini. We also have Dust. So I use a lot of those tools that have been built and approved internally to help me synthesize event insights, to help me build just different ideas, kind of build out different proposals for different events. And as like a gut check as well, a gut check when I maybe want to ask for some community insight or get some ideas there, especially around the ambassador program. I've been using AI to help me kind of like gut check what I'm doing and if it makes sense, and to look at different resources that exist on that as well.
I hear many signals from community bureaus that they are kind of afraid of dehumanizing community with AI tools and like changing like the tone of voice and stuff and make it feel more robotic. So how do you ensure that you are keep being human using AI tools?
Yeah, totally. Sometimes you put something into AI and it comes out and you're like, that sounds awful. I am definitely not using that. I think for me, it's like I always need to write myself, right? Like obviously there are things that can be synthesized, but when I'm writing to the community and it's me writing, like it needs to be me writing first. And of course, I'll maybe gut check with AI in terms of like tone of voice or, for certain uh, for example, a LinkedIn post or an announcement that's not necessarily coming from me, it's coming from like the L&D Collective. Sure, I'll check that for tone and brand, tone of voice and brand for the community. But when it comes for me, like I have to be writing it. If I'm not writing it, like it doesn't make sense. I'm not a robot, so why would I let a robot write that for me? But yeah, I think it's one of those things that like, AI cannot it can't replace community. It can't replace the human behind it because that just, I don't know, it goes against what community is, in
You know,
my
I,
opinion.
I I hear a lot that AI is more like freeing your time so you can actually build human connections.
Yes, absolutely. That's the best way that I found to use it in my own experience.
Carissa, I wish to have the sky as a limit, but time is a limit. So the final question, what is one thing to do right away for someone struggling with identifying their community ROI?
I think I've already said it a couple of times, but I think the one of the first things you can do is just ask your community, where are they finding value in it? And then finding out how do you translate that value into what's valuable for the business? Like, okay, this is what's good for them. How do we plus and equal to get that? If you because you can't just build from what's helpful for the business. It has to be helpful for the community as well. So get to know what's valuable for them and then work from there. I think it's one of the best ways to do it, and it makes sense. It's authentic and it makes sense. You're building for what is actually going to be valuable for the people in your community, and then translating it to what that means for the business and how it can help.
Like it's also like a being a translator because you have to speak the language of business, you have to
Yeah.
speak the language of community, and then like decode both signals, connect them, and then go back again and like to move all the parts to each other. So it's a very interesting journey. And to keep the conversation going, name two people I should reach out to talk about community ROI.
Ah, that's a good question. I would say Whitney, well, maybe Whitney, who is Whitney Marin. She was the CMX Paris chapter host for quite a while. She could be someone really interesting to talk to. She also works in community, and has her own things that she's building in community. And then also Jennifer Larson, she's working at Malt in community right now, and I think that she would be a really great person to talk to. They have a huge community team, so totally different vibe from my experience. So she could also be someone really interesting to talk with.
And last but not least, what is one question about community ROI that I should have asked you but didn't?
Ooh, I mean, maybe we touched on it a little bit, but we could have maybe talked about the ROI for members.
Very fast. I feel like it's a huge, big episode talking about ROI for members. But from your experience, what are like the three biggest values for members?
I think it's first of all connection. They want to connect with people. They want to feel, at least in our community, they don't want to feel alone, and they come to this community to not feel alone. So that connection has to be there and those points to connect with each other. Um, they also need to be able to take something away from it. Coming to this community and connecting, one, that's great. Two, if they're able to take something away from it and that helps them with their job, even better. And I think three, and maybe this isn't for everybody, but I think that a lot of them, want to find a way to be recognized for the work that they're doing and the experience that they have. And I think that's what's led me to really think that, believe that community-led communities are the way to go, because that is what also allows these folks to get the recognition that they deserve, and it gives them the mic to say, hey, you know what? You know better than us. Here's the mic and tell us what you think. So I think that's the final thing that would be really important, for them to really feel like, okay, I'm really getting, a return on the time that I'm putting into this community.
At the end of the day, everyone wants to be heard and seen and recognized. So that's exactly why community is there. Because usually, like
Yeah.
salespeople, man, they won't recognize you. They will get your money from you. Marketing, yeah, maybe like in some articles, whatever.
Yeah.
Customer success, I don't know. Product, they keep building product. But community, that's the sweet spot. So I totally get it. And Karisa, but first of all, I really love your energy, the approach that you are bringing to the community, and always like this trying new things and talking to people and identifying what works, what not, and giving also clear guidelines that, hey, I'm not following you, I'm not running behind you and telling you what to do. Here are the things. If you want, you want. If you don't want, you don't want. And and always keeping this positive attitude, because I totally get that community is not always a bright side. There is a dark side, and sometimes it can be very sad, and sometimes it can be very silent. It can feel like that. But
Yeah.
I still feel that you have a great energy, and thank you so much for coming here and for sharing your experience.
Thank you, Yuri. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, see you in the community world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.